I think you're in a very unique situation where you understand both the United States and Chinese, how things work. If there's an opportunity for you to talk to American, what would you tell them about China and the way Chinese do things and the Chinese values? How would you describe to the American people about what you know, what you see in China? Do you think they didn't ask you to do that is because of you or because they don't? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think that there have been, because there have been times when things are quite sensitive, but it's not so much on the foreign side. All right. I think it's mostly internal side. They'll say, oh, this is a very hot topic, for instance, Xinjiang or Hong Kong or some political scandal and things like that. And I think there is well, I don't think there is. I know there is holding back. But that's on the Chinese side. And on the on the foreigner side, I have not seen it. Although on 2 occasions I did, somebody said to me, well, somebody came up to me. They said, well, who was it? Was it somebody at the top of the chain or was it somebody lower down? And they said, well, actually it was somebody lower down. One of the things that's very difficult about the Chinese system is that it's a silo. Everybody's looking up at their boss and their boss is looking at their boss.
You think it's self-imposed?
Well, not self-imposed. They're trying to guess what the big boss would like. All right. So they, at different levels, they come up with fairly odd things sometimes in terms of what they believe the big boss would want. But I personally believe that that's responsible for a lot of the miscommunications that go out. They actually do more harm than good because it leaves a sour taste, I think. My experiences with people at the top of the power structure in China is that they're very bright, very polished, very thoughtful. They're not like a lot of the politicians I've met in the United States or even in Europe. It's not about what's happening. How do I respond? Let's make something up. They're completely on the other side, which is one of the reasons that I think there's a great difficulty between China and the rest of the world, because the Chinese politicians take everything they do very seriously. It's a result of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of man hours of thinking. Everything is checked, double checked, rechecked, checked again, and then it has to go through the mill of different people's opinions and things like that. It has to be harmonized, and this is just the process they use. So it can be very, very, very difficult. So just saying that they come at it from different perspectives, it does affect how people do it. And I think there's, to a certain extent, self-censorship. And this is one of the things that I have to really deal with internally. Am I self-censoring? I appear on most of all of on every single sensitive issue. I've been asked to make comments, whether it's Xinjiang or Hong Kong, Tibet, Taiwan, South China Seas, international debt, debt diplomacy, you name it. I've done it, and I always start out and says, well, what is important about this, and how do I present a perspective? Because I don't speak for the Chinese government, but I try to figure out what is their perspective? What is behind what they're doing? Are they just, an arbitrary, uncaring dictatorship that runs around torturing people and killing them and has no plan to do something better? Or are they a thoughtful, long-visioned group who subject to political pressures, but is trying to achieve something that's sustainable and works long-term? Generally, I find that it's on the other side. That is not to say that there are not plenty of controversies, that there isn't plenty of corruption, although much less these days. it's not a perfect system. And I worry about that when I go on. I do not want to present China as, quote, this is what everybody should be doing. It's not. What China does is appropriate for China. And, they have their own problems to solve. And I have to try really hard to make sure that I'm not presenting China as some sort of panacea, but still trying to express what the underlying logic or approach that they're trying to do.
I just thought of something. Have you been invited to RT?
Yes, I've done probably in total 5 or 6 shows over the years. Mm-hmm. I don't take money from RT. I don't take press TV, which is Iran, Turkey, all of these things, simply because I don't want people to say, "Oh, well, he's just doing it for money."
Yeah, I watch those stations often as well. Mainly is because I want to see a different perspective on different issues. Because people always say RT is Russia controlled or Russia owned, or they use that kind of term to associate RT. Therefore, RT is a propaganda machine. And as a result, RT says we do not ask our guests to say something or not say something. On the other side, there's a lot of news came out that those big TV networks in the United States, they fired people for saying the wrong thing. So, so what do you say about that?
Well, I mean, one of the favorite tricks today is to accuse other people of doing exactly what you're doing in an effort to deflect attention from it. But to be clear, though, I mean, RT is still it's financed by the government. So is Xinhua, CCTV, etc., BBC. I mean, there's a tremendous number of stations, TRT, et cetera, that are financed by the government. There's a certain amount of influence. What you have in America, Australia, and England are people who, and I'll say this unabashedly, people who have used the media as a means of creating power. And I would point directly to Rupert Murdoch for this. It's brilliant. But brutal. He wanted to impose his views and to build a political machine that could reward him in other ways. And at one time or another, he controlled Australia, England, and America, 3 out of 5 eyes. And the politicians were absolutely either sycophantically cozying up to him or trying to anticipate what he wanted, or seeing him as the enemy. Putting that kind of power in one person's hand who has a very, very, kind of his own Machiavellian view on things, I think has been a tremendous disservice. So American, along with any other commercial television, they have a couple of dangers. One, they're always going to respond to what's popular. They're trying to get as much, viewership as possible. It seems to be pulling not only apart from any kind of journalistic integrity, but also it's leading people astray. It's hardening the kind of polarization that has occurred in the United States and elsewhere. This is not a particular problem to the U.S. You see it in Europe, in England, in Brazil, almost everywhere where, the power of the press can, in fact, determine who is going to be in power.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned you came to China in 2008.
No. I started living in China about 2005. The end
2005. Okay, 2005. Since that time, what are the most positive or negative experiences you have that contradict to your opinion or impression on China before you arrived?
Yeah, in terms of negative things, I mean, there are a number of incidences where, people walking down the street it was odd. There was no queuing. All right. So if there was something that people wanted, there would just be this mass rush and elbowing. And I was subject to that a number of times, even in the subways and things like that. People would be sometimes very, very aggressive. Not all, just a few. But there was a kind of, I have to get mine, and this type of thing. And it was not very pleasant. I also experienced what I call Shaolin Daos. These are the small leaders. I would go out on trips. I was previously chairman of the Wisconsin International Trade Council. So I was reporting to the legislature and the governor about trade issues. China was obviously very big in terms of our target. I came here a number of times. But that led to me going out to, very strange small places. It was very good in terms of seeing the local environment. But these small leaders, from village, county, town, city level, many of them were just horrible. They would show up wearing expensive watches. They were paid equivalent of 1,500 to 3,000 kwai a month, yet they're wearing $150,000 U.S. gold watch. Not U.S. I should say. It would be French or Swiss U.S. dollar value though. They'd be very arrogant. And I looked at that and I said, this country has maybe achieved a lot, but these people are going to bring it down. And that was, especially in some of the early years, I was very, very, very disappointed by some of the people that I met. But the counterbalance to that, what was positive, was seeing the amount of planning that was going in, meeting people at the upper levels of corporations, also in the government, talking to them about how they were planning and the quality of their thinking and, what process they were following. And then, this kind of, effort to get rid of corruption in the system that started in about 2013. Prior to that, it had been a thing where, the leader would come in and he'd, as they say in China, kill a chicken to scare the monkeys. But it would often be very limited. Sometimes it was questionable as to whether it was based on politics. But it really wasn't reaching deep down to the problems. And I had heard, in villages, they had tried to have a limited democracy, and all it had ended up being is that, whoever was the biggest clan and could muster the most amount of votes would win and basically take everything. And that wasn't good. So there was corruption at a number of levels. And I was very impressed that starting in 2013, they started doing something about it. People started following flies, the small leaders, and also the tigers, the big leaders. And people say, oh, it's all politics. It's just, clearing the ranks for his own people or something like that. It's nonsense. There have been people who have risen under the current leadership who have been dealt with extremely harshly. There was a red line that was laid down, and they did it. So that's on one side. But the planning and the ability to create cities as engine blocks that really power the country, the thinking that went into industrial clustering. One of the reasons now, despite the fact that land and development costs and labor costs, even energy, is higher than it used to be, and there are attractive alternatives if you go to Indonesia, etc., is that the companies go, but they come back. Why? Because in the areas that they had their businesses, they could literally do everything they need. There's no time delay. There's no problem with the port logistics. And I give you an example in Kunshan. At the time that I was writing the book there, about, 2/3 of all the world's laptops were being produced there. And I said, well, why here? Economies of scale, that's one thing. But, why are all the companies here? I mean, I could, just be anywhere and just send you my designs and things like that, or work with you on my designs. They said, no, they're here because they can prototype something in an afternoon that would take a company that was not connected the way they were, maybe 6 months to a year. And by that, I mean, if you wanted a screen, you could go across the street. If you wanted a motherboard, go across the other street. If you wanted a camera, digital camera, you could go there. If you needed somebody who did plastic molding to create something for you, they could prototype you within a few days. So as a result, they became extremely efficient, much closer to the market. The competition was there. So I looked at these different areas where it was planning, it was execution, and it was attention to how government was trying to reform itself and keep itself on track. And I was very impressed by that. So there are always positive and negatives